have something a little different today. I realized I hadn't ever really made a video of any of my drawing, and I'm participating in Inktober this year, so I thought it would be fun to do a little video about that, and especially with this one because it's definitely different than what I usually do. I'm not super familiar with figures and portraits, and I mostly do landscapes and environment art, so this was definitely a challenge for me. So I decided to record it and I guess talk a little bit about the process and some of my thoughts. So first of all, this took me about 4 hours to draw. And the reason is because, like I mentioned, I'm not really familiar with figures or portraits. Even though I have taken a figure drawing class, it was a really long time ago and I just haven't really ever done it since then. So whenever I try, it's a big struggle for me. So when I have these visions or ideas, I know it's going to be a challenge. So I have to approach it with a lot of patience. And this particular piece was inspired by a dream that I had about earth sprites. And there was kind of a veil of mystery around it. The dream is kind of fuzzy in my mind, but I had a very clear vision of this moment when she sort of emerged from underground, and she's part of the earth and the earth is part of her. And the viewer isn't supposed to really know whether the tree is becoming her or she's becoming the tree. So I wanted to have a little bit of ambiguity about that. And my biggest challenge was, of course, the figure and the face, which is why it took me so long to draw. But once I finally got it on the paper, I just decided to have fun with it. And I knew I was gonna try something new in terms of watercolor and ink. I decided I wanted to go with like a very storybook kind of illustrative quality. So I began to lay down a nice wash of color in the background, knowing that once it dried, I was going to go over it with ink. So I didn't have to have perfect edges. I just wanted it to be kind of a whimsical background. So that was actually really fun for me, and just being very organic and loose with the first wash of color. Although I was pretty nervous. I took my time with the watercolor because I was a little nervous about the upcoming ink process. I'm still learning ink, and Inktober has been an amazing experience. I've learned so much, and it's only day 11. So yeah, it's if you guys are thinking about doing it, it's definitely worth it. If it's something that you've been wanting to try, ink can be a little intimidating at first, but when you break it down and do a little bit day by day, I find it to be more approachable now. And I honestly think I wouldn't have even tried this piece if I hadn't already been drawing with ink for 10 days. So there's something to be said for that, taking on those kind of challenges. So I had to wait about 15-20 minutes for it to dry before I could do the ink. So I took a little break, tried to get myself pumped up for the upcoming ink layer, had some coffee and a snack, mindlessly scrolled on Instagram for a while, looked out my window, tried to enjoy the moment. But eventually I knew I needed to start the ink. So I was gonna try a bunch of different types of pens with this one. I started going through my pens and I decided to stick with my Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen, which are the big brush, my microns, which are teeny tiny, a brush pen, which will give me like a lot of variation in line. It's one of my favorites. And this new Uni Posca paint pen that I got for any kind of white final touches that I wanted to do. And when it came to drawing, I decided to start with my micron pens because those are the ones that I'm most familiar with and comfortable with, and just allowed me to kind of ease into the whole process of inking on top of this. This is really a new experience for me because usually I will paint something and maybe do a couple lines on top, but really, really rare. And this one was going to be like a very heavily drawn piece in addition to the watercolor. So I wasn't even quite sure how exactly I wanted to approach it. I just knew I wanted anywhere that I had ink to be a very graphic look. So I didn't do a lot of watercolor on the actual tree or the earth sprite. I left that kind of white or empty in order to be able to come back in and do whatever I wanted with the ink. So it was a new experience and really kind of became more and more fun as I did it. It definitely took me a little while to loosen up. These first few lines, I could tell that I was kind of nervous. My hand was a little shaky, and I was like, okay, don't mess up. But yeah, as I went on, it just got a little more fun, and I had some music playing in the background, which kept me relaxed. And if you are similar to me in that you kind of get nervous when it comes to ink, which, seems kind of silly now that I think about it, because certain types of watercolor and other painting mediums are also permanent. But it kind of seems like there's such a permanence to ink that it makes me extra nervous for some reason. But if you're similar to me in that way, maybe try what I'm doing, where I started off very slow and with the type of ink that I'm most comfortable with until I sort of eased into it. So after I had a decent amount started, I decided to switch to my brush pen, and I wanted to give the tree a very kind of gnarled, rough bark texture. So I thought this would be a good pen for it, because it does allow me to have a pretty wide variation in line depth or width. So I can get really thick areas and really build up the darkness quickly, but also thin it out in certain areas to make it look like the bark is highlighted, or to add to that overall depth. After a while, I started to lose my sense of fear, and it just became very therapeutic. And I started to have this like really weird excitement building inside me, because just in the moments of creation, I was thinking about all the future drawings and ideas that I can make come to life now that I've finally started to kind of face my fear of doing this sort of thing. I'm very interested in mixed media, and I've never wanted to be like held back by only knowing how to use one or two different things, or different painting mediums especially. So being able to combine painting with drawing and create a really interesting piece has always been one of my goals. So this piece was pretty eye-opening for me, and definitely filled me with a lot of excitement for the future. I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get something right from the very first try. And it also can be frustrating when you try it and you fail and you try and you fail. But that's all part of art. That is a huge part of the experience. Failing is just as important as any kind of success. And so learning how to love the entire process is hugely important to your overall sanity and happiness as an artist, because it is very easy to get down on yourself, especially when you're learning a new medium. So I was definitely keeping that in mind while I was doing this piece. And even though there were plenty of mistakes, I also was realizing that this was just one step towards my final goal of being able to really create interesting pieces using any medium at my disposal. So my biggest takeaway from this entire experience was just to trust myself and have fun. Because once I loosened up and really just started losing myself in the different values that were possible with the different types of inks, I had so much fun with it. And that's something that I value really highly, even above making a perfect piece. So, my advice to anybody else out there who is nervous about ink is just give it a try. Try different types of ink as well. You might have one that you try and you really hate, but others that you really, really love and kind of speaks to you as an artist. So experiment, but most of all, be patient with yourself and try to enjoy the whole process, including some of the bloopers or mistakes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a little different from what I usually do, but I had a lot of fun with it and I definitely learned a lot. So I'm looking forward to more drawing videos in the future. And if you have anything specific you want to see, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.